Well, Eric and I are born and bred here in the state of Missouri. And if you've ever driven through certain isolated parts of the Ozarks, you can absolutely understand why these lands were apparently teeming with monsters once upon a time. From the bluffs and the caves to the river bottoms, the thick forests, the hills, the Ozark Mountains.
Lots of places to hide, stalk their prey.
And we've always tried to keep this podcast sort of close to home. We've talked about some Missouri monsters. We've talked about the Momo, the Missouri monster itself.
Ozark Howler.
The Ozark Howler. We've talked about quite a few things. The White River Monster.
Joplin Spooklight, the albinos of Springfield.
We decided to just kind of group a bunch of them together in an episode we're going to call Missouri Monster Sightings. Not sightings of the Missouri monster. That'd be entirely different. Missouri Monster Sightings.
There we go. Clarification.
From a child born into this world, we are taught what to believe. Closed-minded we become, fearful to be deceived. Still we desire to know what lies beyond that locked door. The art of the storyteller, conjuring tales of legend and lore. History hidden, lost knowledge, things forgotten and the unknown. These are the things that direct us and will set the tone. Welcome, friends, to another episode of Nightmares on the Lost Highway.
Now, I started with one of my favorite monsters, and I think when people think of monsters roaming around our great big country, you think of one in particular, a uniquely American monster, even though they're seen all over the world.
Bigfoot, Sasquatch.
Bigfoot, that large hairy hominid that we love to discuss so much. I think we've done Alaskan Killer Bigfoot. We've talked about different Sasquatch sightings. Really, I think we've discussed at one point in time, there'll probably be an episode for almost every state when it comes to Bigfoot. But Missouri is ranked 9th in the rankings for the top states to encounter the Bigfoot. So out of 50 states, we're
up
fifth.
there. I didn't realize that.
There's been 174 sightings from Missouri reported to the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization, the BFRO, one of the most well-known Bigfoot research groups. And sightings of Bigfoot across the country go all the way back to the year 986, when Leif Erikson and the Vikings arrived in the New World, and he described seeing a creature that was, quote, horribly ugly, hairy, swarthy, and with big black eyes, that the Vikings called the Skellring.
Skellring?
Skellring. Skellring.
Interesting. Okay.
Now, the oldest reports of a hairy man-beast running around the state of Missouri is from 1925. However, that one turned out to be an unkempt, mentally ill man roaming Oregon County, and the local sheriff escorted the wild man out of town in short order. The next oldest report is from 1967, just 5 years before Momo became the media sensation. And since the late 60s, 65% of Missouri sightings were in the heavily forested towns across Missouri's Ozark region, which covers most of the land south of the Missouri River. I've got a collection of stories here. One, in the late 1980s, this was deep in the woods south of Van Buren. Two teenagers were camping when they heard bone-chilling noises that they described as sounding like ape sounds, deep, rapid oohs and ahs not far from their tent. I think, you can get the idea.
Right.
They became even more frightened when they heard another creature respond from the opposite side of their camp. Now, one of the boys said he could tell the creatures walked upright on 2 feet because he could hear the sounds their steps made in the leaves, the underbrush there. So and he'd been out in the woods before. He said they also sounded like they were larger than bears. Now, after about 15 minutes, the voices seemed to be getting closer to each other, eventually meeting up and then wandering away from the camp without ever being seen. One of the boys described the night as the most terrifying time I've ever had in the woods. We were terrified until we got back to the truck. So the next morning, they broke camp, made the 2-day hike back to their vehicle, and drove home. Now, in the winter of 1988 or 99 in Pulaski County, where I was born and raised
your old stomping grounds.
Yeah, till I met my wife and moved to Lebanon here. On Highway 17 north of Waynesville, a piece of road that I've been on more times than I can count. There was a family driving from Crocker to Waynesville, Waynesville, St. Robert area, and they sighted something. They had crossed the Waynesville-Crocker Bridge on Highway 17. There's the Ruby Doo and the Gasconade kind of flow together.
I'm picturing it now. Yep.
Yeah, you've got the bluff on the one side with the cave up there.
And the nice river bank down off
on
the other side.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
They were almost out of those curves just after the bridge, because, there's some really good curves right there, where there's the bluff on one side and the river on the other. They were getting close to entering Waynesville city limits. This was maybe 7 o'clock on a cold winter night. It had already been dark for a couple hours at this point. When they rounded one of those curves, there was another car coming the other direction, and there, illuminated in the lights of both cars, was a thing, like basically standing right on the yellow line. They described it as about 7 to 8 feet tall, covered in hair, and it was almost frozen like a deer caught in the headlights for a moment. The husband was driving. He slammed on the brakes. The other car apparently slammed on their brakes, and they kind of both went just past the creature on either side. They looked back, and there, standing on the yellow line still, illuminated now in the taillights of both vehicles, was this big creature. They said it stood there for about 30 seconds, and then it just sort of stepped off the road into the direction of the creek there. At this time, the wife was extremely scared. She was pleading with her husband. She's like, just go, go, go. And so they took off and saw that the other car left just about the same time they did. Online, she's, of course, asking if anybody from the other car remembers the sighting to come forward, just to verify, of course, that they saw what they thought they saw. But yeah, she said they didn't want to tell anybody about it for a while because, people might think they're a little crazy. Now, there's a sighting here near Smithville Lake in Clay County in late May of 2012. A student at Missouri State University was with 3 other friends. They were driving near the game access area close to the lake. This was late at night. They had the windows cracked, just kind of, puttering around. And they began to feel uneasy, and the area around them became deathly silent. And when you're in the woods at night and the woods become silent, that's a bad sign. They got ready to leave, and they saw something about 20 yards in front of their Jeep, just standing in the grass. It was standing in grass that was about 3 to 4 feet high. Just this big thing with eyes like taillights staring at them. In a panic, they drove through a small cable fence and pulled it up out of the ground and almost hit the creature in the process. They said as they got close, it stood up, and it was at least 2 feet taller than the Jeep they were in. So they passed within 15 to 20 feet of it as they sped away. One person described it as, it looked like a person, but not like a person. Kind of like a monkey, but not like a monkey. Or ape, rather. And then we just drove out of there. Now here's one a little closer to home. There was a sighting near Grove Springs on October 5th, 2020. This is, of course, south of Lebanon on Highway 5. And they were on Highway 5 heading towards Lebanon on TT near the intersection with an inn. I got to admit, I don't know street names very well. You probably better know where that's at than I do.
Know roughly where that is because my sister and brother-in-law used to have a dairy farm down in the Grove Springs area. So, yeah.
Well, the witness on this particular encounter said it was a beautiful day. It was about 9:30, 10:30 in the morning. They were heading from Grove Springs, Lebanon, like I said, when they looked to their left and saw a huge, hulking creature. They said nearly 9 feet tall. She slowed down when she saw the creature and said she passed within 15 feet of it. She described it as having reddish-brown hair, probably 3.5 feet wide across the shoulders. So the arms were hanging by its side and its hands were down below the knee. It looked as if he had just stepped out of the tree line when he was spotted and was like looking back and forth like you would for traffic, which I thought was kind of a neat detail. Like they
Safety
know.
first, Sasquatches.
She said she looked him in the eyes as she drove past and described those eyes as a deep, deep brown and huge. She also said she could smell a musty odor in the air, which is pretty common for Bigfoot sightings.
Typical.
She said she felt no fear, nor did she think the creature was afraid of her either. After she passed, she said the creature stepped across the 2-lane highway in 2 steps.
Wow, that's a big stride.
And then disappeared into the woods on the other side. Now, 2 days later, her daughter and her friend were coming home from work. They turned south on TT, and on the edge of the vision, they said they saw 4 yellow glowing eyes off to the side of the road. Probably the most recent sighting I have here, and in the last sighting for Bigfoot that I'm going to talk about, is October of 2024, so just last year. A man from Pike County claimed to have seen a Bigfoot when he was driving along a creek. He came to a bend in the creek. He said there was about an 8-foot drop off from the road to the creek, off the edge of the road, which if you've drove down any side roads around here, you've inevitably seen something similar. He said when he looked over, there was a creature. It was squatting down in the creek. He said it turned towards him like a man would and made eye contact for, quote, what seems like an eternity. I froze. I could not move. It seemed as if the creature wasn't concerned that he was there, just turned and looked up at him, still squatting there in the river. And then it jumped up the 8 feet to the level of the road.
Wow.
And then just took off running on 2 legs. Now,
poor thing was probably just down there taking a squat in the river. And this guy just walked up. Well, what are you staring at?
The top 5 Missouri counties where you're most likely to see a Bigfoot They're broken down by county as follows. There's a 33.3% of all sightings reported in Missouri happen in Jackson County. Taney and Crawford counties have 22.2% sightings each.
Down around the Branson area,
Pulaski has 13.3%.
just north of us.
Cass County has 4%, and then all other counties amount to 5%.
So unfortunately, Laclede didn't make the list.
I couldn't
local
find a
county.
Laclede County sighting. Grove Spring there was the closest one I could find. But yeah, we have Bigfoots around here allegedly, and again, we have some pretty thick woods, and
There's a lot of places to hide in the woods if you want to hide out, for sure. Well, I really stretched to try to find some, lesser known cryptids, if you will, for Missouri. And I surprised myself. I came up with actually 3 little stories. And a couple of them are similar. You might find some reminiscence to some other cryptids. For example, there's a strange tale that ties back to an area of around Potosi, Missouri, in a region called Monkey Mountain. Now, I had personally never heard of it. I'd stumbled across it. I did find out that there are actually 2 Monkey Mountains in Missouri. One is near Blue Springs, and then the other one's a little bit further up north. And the story here, with the proof that I could find, which was quite honestly nothing more than a few newspaper clippings and blurbs and then a lot of stuff that's been passed down, I couldn't determine which Monkey Mountain in Missouri it was. So let me just pre-state that. Now, as I said, the legend doesn't have a lot of solid proof. A few newspaper clippings, mostly from the 60s and 70s, and then some elusive conjectures of stories shared by locals. But it is an interesting one. And again, it's one that I think you'll find ties back to some of the stuff that Bill was even just talking about. Now, the story goes, there was a circus train traveling through the area one stormy evening. Apparently, lightning had struck and fallen a tree across the tracks. Unbeknownst to the poor train engineer, he came around this corner, and as you could probably already guess where this story is going, you would be correct. This train rounded the curve of the mountain, striking the fallen tree, derailed and flipped into a ravine below with gushing turbulence from the heavy downpours of the storm in the last few days. Now, this circus train is said to have had zebra, giraffe, and of course, a boxcar of monkey business. Now, some accounts say that these were all small, like spider monkeys, the small, more Langley type. Other newspaper clips say they were chimpanzees. There's quite a difference there.
I'm not sure Langley-like is a phrase.
Langley, it is in my work. No, I don't know, but skinny, gangly. We'll go with gangly. Langley still works, so we'll go with gangly. Now, another one says, it was actually a collection of different species of monkeys, and including a trio of gorillas. Now, many of the exotic animals unfortunately drowned, it said to the newspaper accounts, while their cages were still in the boxcars that, basically flooded when they fell into the river or the ravine below. But the story goes that the boxcar that the monkeys were in, many of the monkeys were able to escape because it was kind of in the water and up on the bank, and it actually smashed a hole in the side of the boxcar. I would assume you would still have the monkeys in a cage if you have different ones, but maybe they had it segregated or something.
I remember when we did like swamp stories, the alligator man, this is kind of how his story started.
Yep.
It seems to be kind of common.
It does. So, now, the story goes on that many of the monkeys were able to escape, whatever type monkeys those may be, during the damage of the boxcar, and that allowed them to flee deep into the surrounding areas, which is, we flash forward to what is now called Monkey Mountain. Now, it would be nearly a week, it said, before the wreckage of the train could be removed and really a surveying of that wreck to be cleared. A small publication in a local newspaper would give mention to the account, the accident, and for about 15 years, that was it. There was nothing. Until a night when 2 coon hunters were running their dogs one evening near Monkey Mountain, there in Missouri, with their coal-powered headlamps providing chase after the dogs who had picked up a strong scent trail, and they were going crazy, barking in the pursuit of something, chasing something, deep inside of a particular canyon. Now, the hunters followed, and immediately stating that they heard these uncanny-like screams from at least of what they described as a dozen sources that echoed through the canyon and these very, very steep, almost vertical, straight up bluffs. Now, one of their dogs, they somehow had managed and was high atop of them, over 30 foot taller than they were in the canyon. He apparently had managed to climb up many of the dangerous bluff rocks, and they heard him let out a yelp. And then this dog fell about 30 feet to its death on outcrop of rocks directly in front of them, kind of trying to send a little message here maybe. They said they heard rocks that were moving as if several creatures were pacing or stalking them from up above, and then now almost communicating in sounds of grunts, whistles, and screams. Now, I'm assuming back in this time frame, people would be at least vaguely familiar with monkeys. I mean, obviously, they might have seen them at a circus. There's different types of monkeys. They do make different types of sounds.
Well, and again, like people, even today, I don't believe if somebody heard a monkey noise, they might necessarily know it was a monkey. Heck, I heard a peacock scream once.
Oh.
In the moment, did not realize what it was. I thought I was getting chased out of the woods by a Bigfoot.
Isn't that peacocks the ones that scream like, help, help, or something like that?
I don't remember what it was, but it was loud and it scared me. And again, after I thought about it, and here's the crazy thing. I knew there was a house not far from where I was that had peacocks. So
it would be
should
logical.
have known.
Yeah.
But yeah, for a minute there, I was like, holy crap.
Well, when you're out there in the dark, things don't always check balance. But, well, upon daybreak, the men returned with several other armed neighbors with rifles to investigate the area further in the story. They did find the bloody pool where the dog had fallen. No sign of the dog. They did also begin to hear the calling of several whistles again, hoots and screams that said chilled them to the bone. Now, a couple of the younger men flung their rifles over their back and started trying to climb these almost vertical bluffs. Now those two went on record saying that they described several small holes leading into a larger cavernous system. Now, they entered chasing what they believed was a panther. Totally kind of different there. Black, shadowy figure would sound different. Panther, monkey, panther. But, however, after the pursuit for nearly 20 minutes deep inside this cave, they found themselves lost and turned around. Now, here's where the story takes kind of a weird twist to my thoughts. As they're in there trying to retrace their own tracks and trying to find their way out, they are noticing that this is a very wet cave floor. And while there are areas of rock that would leave no path or no track, they quickly spotted some in the mud. It wasn't their tracks. Instead, it was a barefoot human-like footprint. However, larger and smaller sizes, indicating either a family or possibly different species, monkeys, whatever this may be. Now, obviously, some quickly tie these connections and say, well, that's some of those monkeys, the descendants of the circus monkeys that had made homes in these caves and these harsh mountains. Still others believe back that the origin may go back a bit further, much further. The indigenous tribes of Native American Indians, especially here in Missouri, often spoke of a small race of people covered in hair from head to toe, claiming they had their own language and that they were guardians, protectors of the forests. They told in their indigenous stories of how this race of little hairy people, could vanish into the darkness or even penetrate into a rock, blending into a boulder, or even fading into a tree to escape being seen. And we talked a little bit about this with like the Alaskan Bigfoot up there, that a lot of those indigenous people believe that that's why they're so hard to find, was literally they are so in tune with nature, they literally become a part of the forest, a particular tree or rock or a boulder. Now, one last tidbit somewhat connected this story to another one that we were just kind of joking about, the circus train kind of thing, and that is the Beeman monster of Missouri, a legendary ape-like creature of Missouri folklore that seems to call home basically in the region of Sedalia, Missouri, and that's where our state fair is held at. and it dates back to the early 1900s. While again, there's not a lot of documented proof, it is said to be like a large gorilla, hairy, hominid, that gets its origin story back to a 1904 circus train wreck in which, you guessed it once again, some of these gorillas were rumored to have escaped. So yeah, there's a lot of the same paths that a lot of these stories seem to follow.
I think we see that a lot. Similar origins, and I mean, you think of the circus train and the animals and whatnot. Lion sightings. I think when we talked about big cat stuff, there was a lion story that was very similar. It's just a good way to explain an animal that's in a place it doesn't belong. Much better, I might add, than an episode of Coast to Coast that I once heard, which described a portal that lions would leap through in Africa, and that was why you would occasionally see lions in other places.
Wow, that's out there. Okay, all
right. So from Bigfoot to another similar creature, and I would say this one has crept into the culture in the last 20 years or so, especially. I don't remember hearing much about it prior to that. And before I get too much further, I want to give a shout out to a one-time guest, author D.A. Roberts.
Oh, yes.
Well, episode 64, where we had a nice conversation with him. We're going to talk about the Dogman a little bit here and some Dogman sightings here in Missouri. The Dogman is sort of a Sasquatch-like creature, but if you wanted to think about a werewolf, something like that, a humanoid wolf creature.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently they oftentimes have territorial disputes with Sasquatch. So, that does come up.
Now, I will say when I first heard the term Dogman, and I think DA and all of us kind of discussed this a little bit, I at least was a bit confused. It's like, is a Dogman a Bigfoot? Is a big man
a big man?
A big man. Is a Bigfoot
is
a dog
big man? A dog
Is a big man in a hairy suit considered a dog man or a Sasquatch?
No, again, they're two separate things.
Because the Dogman, if you stop and think about it, with the name, it has more of a dog-like face. Yep. Where obviously a Sasquatch or Bigfoot have more human features.
Like ape-like. So I've got a couple of Dogman stories here. One, this guy sort of had multiple Dogman stories as he progressed through the years. The first one started when he was younger. He was kind of out four-wheeling, driving down a country road looking for deer. Him and his cousin had apparently been following a deer for a little while. But it seemed like they could hear something that seemed to be, off in the woods, sort of running along beside them, sort of keeping pace, following them. Never really caught a glimpse of it. Well, they finally stopped and they saw a deer off in the distance. They had stopped to watch it, but they kept hearing something large just off to their right in the woods. When they looked, they saw what appeared to be a very large wolf-like creature. And being two young kids out in the woods, they kind of did what you would normally do. They just sort of whipped them four-wheelers around and headed back to home.
I just knew you were going to say they jumped the fence and pursued after it.
No, they got out of there. When they got back to the cousin's home, they mentioned this wolf-like creature to the uncle, and they were told that we don't have wolves in this part of this country, the state. You wouldn't have seen a wolf, and so
back in the day we did, though.
Kind of discounted it. Now later, he had a friend who'd had some strange encounters at night. They'd heard this fizzing and popping outside near the power lines out of where they lived when they lost power in their trailer. So the man's wife called him at work the next night after they got the power back onto their trailer, and she said that she was there alone when something hit the side of the trailer. And when she looked out the window to see what was going on, there was a large dog-like creature peering in the window at her, which I think would cause you to need new pants.
Yes.
The man also had multiple encounters around his own home. There were a lot of nights where he'd go out, maybe walk into the car, just checking on something outside, but he would have these feelings like there was something just outside of his line of sight, just out in the tree line, watching him. He felt like he was being watched. And there was even one night where he heard something moving around, something heavy on the roof of his home. And he went outside, of course, to see what was going on and didn't see anything. Another good story, and I like this one because it comes from a credible source, and again, I want to, give credit back to D.A. Roberts. Some of the sources I was looking for, they even credited him, that if it wasn't for him, some of these stories would have never come out. So this one involves an Air Force security specialist. And he claims that him and his little group were ambushed by a pack of dogmen in a state park 30 years ago. He was stationed at Whiteman Air Force Base in 1993, where the stealth bombers are at. And apparently, it was a high security area. There was a lot of stuff going on back in 1993. I think the stealth bombers had just kind of been owned up to at that point.
Yep.
They had gone to Knob Noster State Park, very near the base.
Love that name, Knob Noster.
And this is where they had their encounter. It was on October night, sometime around the middle of the night, about 1:30 or so. He and his 3-man team were in the trees, and they were about to move on to a new position. I guess they were doing some training exercises out in the woods when they noticed an awful smell. Now, they thought it was coming from a nearby chicken farm. They'd smelled that before, but they would be wrong. On this occasion, they had taken cover in the woods, but they had night vision capabilities. They had some night vision goggles, and they spotted red eyes in the distance about 8 feet off the ground. Now, initially, they thought it was probably just an owl, but they looked, and they saw that the eyes belonged to a creature that none of them had ever seen before. Something large, like a wolf, but standing over 8 feet tall on its hind legs. A great big, dog man.
Big puppy.
The team realized that there were other creatures behind them too as they started to listen a little more, and that the one in front had just merely been a distraction while the others moved into flanking positions behind them and around them. Well, they realized that the others were still moving into position and they still had time, so they quickly made their escape before the beast could close in. And who knows? Who knows if they'd ever been seen again if they hadn't got out of there as quickly as they did.
All right, well, I've got another one, and this is the legend of the cave crawlers. It takes place actually not far from here at all. Drove through here just a few days ago. Lynn Creek, Missouri. Now, Missouri is known as the cave state, among many, many things, but the cave state, boasting with over 6,000 documented underground cavern systems lying just beneath the surface. Now, that's not 6,000 miles, that is 6,000 individual noted cavern entrances. So that 6,000 could exponentially, definitely go up, possibly even as high as 100,000, 500,000 miles of underground tunnels that most have yet to be mapped. Now, many of these caves have been mapped, indexed to connect up one with another, just in a large, basically ongoing labyrinth. But there are still way, way more that have never been explored. Some are not even capable for a human to be able to crawl through to map. And myself, being a member of a past spelunking Missouri group, I will tell you, we have went into some of those caves mapping stuff, and then we later submitted our maps to the Missouri Conservation. In some areas that when I was a much skinnier lad, I was still getting stuck.
I remember going in a cave when I was early 20s. Yeah, much smaller. And it was like you had to shimmy belly crawl into the beginning of it.
Oh, yes.
I wouldn't even be able to start that trip now.
There's actually one there in Waynesville on the highway that we were just talking about with your the sighting where the bluffs are on one side and the river's on the other. There's a major cave there. It's privately owned, so you're not supposed to go in it and trespass. But we had got permission way back in the 90s. There's an area that is dubbed the meat grinder, and it is that purposefully because the floor and the ceiling are stalactites hanging down. And it's basically like you're dragging your body through a meat grinder. It ripped our shirts on our shoulders. You're grinding your meat as you crawl through.
That sounds bad.
Well, the worst part is once you get through, you realize you got to go back through again to come back out. So you're only halfway there. But back to the story. Obviously, with all these caves lying beneath us, it does kind of conjure up the imagination and occasional discovery of indigenous tribes of the Ozarks, where maybe some cave drawings have occurred or different stories that have been passed on, for one of the strangest looking creatures one could ever dream up, one of which are said to thrive and live in our cave systems that stem back with an origin story to Bagnell Dam and Lynn Creek area. Now, one of the first recorded sightings of these reclusive cave dwellers date back to the time of the Civil War. In a letter to his mother, a Union soldier reported that while on night watch, he spotted this strange man-like creature with alabaster skin that shone, almost glimmered in the moonlight in a reflective way. In 1898, the owner of a local tavern in Old Lynn Creek was said to be heading home early one in the morning hours after closing up when he saw a similar looking beast in the tree line along the northwest edge of town. And then again in 1926, on a stretch of land outside of Montreal, Missouri, a farmhand claimed that one summer night he was sleeping under the stars and he awoke to find a man-sized, sickly white, again kind of alabaster-skinned, hairless beast crouched by a watering hole just a few feet from him. Now, the farmhand later told the local newspaper the creature didn't seem afraid at all, similar to what Bill was talking about with some of the encounters, but instead appeared to be stalking some sort of other prey that wasn't the poor lad lying there sleeping beneath the stars. Now, it was in this newspaper story that started locals whispering about a strange creature or creatures inhabiting Missouri's dark caves. Those creatures that had become known as the Missouri cave crawlers. Now, after years of perplexing but harmless sightings, in the summer of 1931, shortly after Bagnell Dam was completed and the reservoir area, now known as the Lake of the Ozarks, flooded hundreds of the area's low-lying caves, strange things began happening in Camden County. Now, the central portion of the area near Versailles, Missouri, many farmers there reported large livestock being taken down and killed, often in very peculiar ways, with strange human-like footprints being barefoot, once again being spotted near the kill sites, leading down into the ravines and rivers, and there they just vanished. Other farmers would be awakened by their trusty dogs at night, where they would venture out to the barn to find strange flattened piles of hay in the loft upstairs above the barn, that they said resembled what they could only make out as makeshift beds. They also noted that a lot of food had been stolen, like from windowsills, garden beds, even off of wagons, in which scraps of these bones, fragments of the plates could be found inside these barns and the surrounding area around these nesting or bed sites. Now, were they just homeless people? Was it some gypsies or possibly outlaws on the run from the law? But why be barefoot? That connection seemed to tie all the stories together. Barefoot. Now, in the 1940s in Camden County, it was reported several strange grave robbings begin to occur. So this story just goes deeper and deeper and crazier and crazier. In particular, one graveyard dubbed the Graveyard of Lost Souls, which could be found at the end of Old Route 5. Now, I will say, I did some research. I was like, I love that name. Graveyard of Lost Souls. Where is this at? I've got to visit.
You use that in D&D.
Yeah, that's like, exactly. I could not find that name assigned, so I'm thinking that is obviously a slang term probably assigned, but it did clearly state it was at the end of Old Route 5. Basically, it just drove right into this graveyard. Now, this particular graveyard, we're going to continue to call it the Graveyard of Lost Souls, was a place where police went to interview the caretakers. That's where these grave robbings had occurred. There was a Miss Mary Crowler and her young son. Now, both reported to the police seeing nothing out of the ordinary or peculiar. However, they couldn't argue the fact that there had been holes dug and body parts and sometimes entire bodies dug up and were missing. Now, for many years, this occurred without explanation. And later, it did seem to kind of spread out to the surrounding cemeteries with similar accounts being shared. Still, the only thing that was ever found were these barefoot tracks, often being spotted coming and going from the cemetery gates. Dogs were even called in, used to try to gain a scent trail, but it was always the same. The trail would grow cold when the tracks went off into a ravine or a stream and vanished. Now, by the summer of 1976, Camdenton, Missouri was celebrating their centennial celebration. However, things were not as festive as one might think they were in the front curtain. Now, there had been an increasing number of missing persons in the region, some proclaimed as accidental drownings, some of hikers or hunters that apparently just got lost, yet no bodies were being found. Now, as the city of Camdenton grew, and in the 1970s it brought with it a huge influx of population, It was about this time the story began to unravel as a group of amateur spelunkers, that would be cavers, found a small sinkhole that rappelled down into and it led to a much larger cave system. They followed the larger system, documenting it with their progress and mapping, and they found an exit form from that cave that came out near the river just behind the cemetery of lost souls. Now, as they exited into the daylight, kind of straining and spotting the old cemetery, which had now become derelict with many years passing and overgrown and totally unkept, they began to do a bit of research. And they found the caretaker woman that I'd spoke of earlier by the name of Mary Crowler had long passed away. Now her son, the younger son, way back at the time of the 30s, had been left the task of caretaker. However, even he had went missing now for many years as we had advanced from the 30s into the late 1970s, 1976 to be precise. The spelunking sleuths did a bit of historical research and found the young boy of Mary Crowler, the caretaker, was born about 1930. They also found the father's name lacking on the birth certificate. As they began to inquire and dig a bit deeper, the story took on even more of a chilling side tale. Again, not a lot of factual proof, but easy to connect the dots. History dictates when the Bagnell Dam was built, they actually flooded the entire town known as the Old Town of Lynn Creek. Now, this was announced well in advance, and according to records, many of the homes were even dismantled and even moved to New Lynn Creek and other areas. However, there was still at least 3 church buildings, some with graveyards that were hidden by the murky waters. Now, this is where the legend comes of the cave crawler, depending on which story you might believe. Number 1, some farmers refused to give up on their land, and it is said that they drowned with their family homes and their homesteads as they were being flooded. That's kind of morbid, but right out of a horror movie. Number 2, those souls that were buried in the graveyards attached to the churches that now lay at the bottom of the Lake of the Ozark, once being in these graveyards, were now at unrest. And regardless, these half-ghost, half-human, maybe zombie-like monstrosities were cast out of heaven, and they weren't accepted by hell, but rather doomed to roam the earth, or in our instance, the caves of Missouri. Now, rumors further added that Mary Crowler, the caretaker of the graveyard of lost souls, became intimate with one of these troubled souls.
That's what I was waiting for when you started. I was like, she hooked up with one of these
She
crawlers.
hooked up with one of the crawlers. And her young son was actually a hybrid, becoming the first cave crawler.
I don't know about you, man, but I have definitely seen some folks in Missouri
Oh, yeah.
that
You're a cave crawler, aren't you?
you might be half cave crawler.
You might be a cave crawler if. Now, we may never know, but it is, said due to this possible crossbreeding with the living to the dead that he too was cursed to forever roam the earth. I loved the story. Again, not a lot of factual stuff, some newspaper clippings. The flooding of Old Lynn Creek's pretty well documented in several books, but love that twist, and I would love to find the graveyard of lost souls. So if any of the listeners out there might be familiar with that story and would care to share that information, I would drag Bill kicking and screaming, and we would go have a haunting good time.
Well, sir, your story reminded me of a story of my own, and I'll show you here on my phone. I've had multiple encounters with a strange cave creature here in Missouri myself. Hang on a minute.
The elusive cave creature.
Hey, I got another one for you.
He showed me an image
much better
basically lurking on a giant rock. This one is getting ready to pounce out.
And here's a pretty good one. I sent this one to my son. I said, I don't know why, but I feel like there was something behind us in that cave.
This is a picture of Bill and his daughter with this creepy possible cave crawler lurking on a giant boulder behind them.
Like I said, we've gotten into hiking, and when you hike in Missouri, you find caves. And my son's favorite thing to do is to scramble up into one of these caves and assume a sinister pose and insist that we take a picture of him.
Get photobombed.
This is my 21-year-old son, who is fully an adult at this point, according to the law.
Kudos.
But he loves to. So every time we find a cave, he likes to crawl up into it and make this weird, bring his hands up and crouch over.
Does he
and
ever make
a
like
face.
noises and stuff, or is it all just like a photo
It's
bomb?
just
I'm
to
just
take
in the
a
background.
picture. But
Well,
yeah,
kudos to him.
like I said, I sent one of those to my older son one day and was like, I just get a feeling there was something in that cave behind us. There's my son crouched up on a boulder. So, my last little story here, I felt was a good. You got your chocolate in my peanut butter. You got your peanut butter on my chocolate. For me, anyway, the way what I had come up with. So
I remember that commercial. That's the sad part.
That's old Reese's deal.
Yeah.
So here's another story from Pulaski County, not too far from where we're sitting right now. And this was reported by a pair of experienced Bigfoot investigators. They believe they have a Bigfoot family group living in their research area. And so one night during a full moon, this was in October. I don't know exactly what year, but I don't think it was that long ago. But during a full moon in October, they were on their hilltop there, and they were monitoring 2 juveniles and an adult Sasquatch. They could hear them walking around in the leaves, of course, and then every now and then, they'd also hear like a clack or a wood knock coming from different directions. Pretty standard Bigfoot communication.
Intimidation.
Yeah. After a while, it seemed as if the mood of these interactions changed, and it was as if what was once fun for the Bigfoots had changed, and they became a lot more cautious and almost agitated. One of the investigators heard something to their north, and so went down the hill to investigate while the other one stayed at the camp there. The other investigator came running back up the hill in a hurry and said he'd seen one of the younger Bigfoots come out of the tree line and run for the other. There was a fire break there, and ran across the fire break. And something about 6 foot tall with pointy ears and a long snout chased it across the fire break into the woods. Well, after hearing what the other investigator had seen, they went back to their vehicle, and the one that had stayed behind got a pistol, as they just recently purchased a .44. They got the pistol, they loaded it, and they headed back out. Now, the whole time, they could hear these 2 young Bigfoots kind of chattering, and the big one was stomping, trying to intimidate and put on a display. They were clearly angry about something, and they said they'd never acted like this before when the investigators were there. So they weren't, it wasn't the people that were getting them, agitated. The duo went down to the fire break where the wolf-like creature had been seen, and they started scanning the area with a pair of handheld spotlights that they brought with them. Well, they saw something moving around, just in the trees, couldn't quite make it out, and heard a few short growls. Well, finally, they caught whatever it was in one of the spotlights. It was going between 2 of the trees, and what they saw, they completely unexpected, was a 6 foot tall wolf walking on its hind legs.
That don't happen normally.
Yeah. The armed investigator fired a shot into the air, trying to scare it off, and the beast turned and fled into the woods. They thought, okay, then we've handled that. They cautiously made their way. Cautiously made their way back to their camp at the top of the hill, but they could hear something in the woods, kind of keeping pace with them, just out of sight, just in the trees there. And when they got back to camp, they kept listening, and they heard this thing approaching. So the one investigator, without the gun, started sweeping the woods with a spotlight, while the other had the gun, ready. They were ready to go. And they kind of pinpointed where the sound was coming from, and said the creature approached them coming out of the woods without fear through the trees. And the armed investigator took a shot and hit it square in the ribs. They said there was no doubt. I saw the bullet go in. We saw, clearly it as if struck by the bullet. Said it fell to the ground, but immediately got off. No. But immediately got up and ran off into the woods. They could hear it kind of crashing through the underbrush, and even at one point they heard it like trip or fall over something, and then hop up and continue on. Well,
they injured it. They injured it pretty hard.
Well, they were both pretty freaked out by this point, as I think you would be. They broke camp and they left. The next morning, they went back. They figured they would track this creature and see if it died somewhere close by.
Blood trail, tracks, everything, yeah.
They did manage to kind of track it from its footprints in the brush from where they had shot it. They found the place where it had apparently fallen. They found a bunch of disturbed leaves and underbrush. Everything was all torn up. And they said from there, it was even easier to track. At one point, they found a perfect canine track in the mud on a ridge that was over 8 inches across.
Wow.
However, they never found any blood and eventually lost the trail. Now, they say they followed up with a Native American fellow investigator that they had some associations with. Afterwards, they told their story, Because they were checking in with other investigators. Hey, have you seen something like this?
Is this normal in this neck of the woods?
Now, a lot of people said Dogman, so that's kind of why I lumped it in here. But I guess the Native American guy said the lack of blood would lead him to believe that they had, in fact, actually seen a skinwalker. And so, this was someone who
again, that's where the definitions kind of get blurred a little bit. It could be either or easily.
Yeah. But yeah, I figured.
And what time frame was this?
This was in October, and I would say probably in the last 4 or 5 years. There wasn't a year on there, but it was posted.
Pretty recent.
When it was posted as if it had happened recently. So.
That is an interesting one. Well, my last story is kind of a short one, but it was just so bizarre when I stumbled across it. I went down into the cryptid hole, aka the rabbit hole.
That sounds dirty.
Dirty. And I couldn't find a whole lot on it. But again, it was repeating the same facts. So, we've talked about in the past Virginia's sheep squatch, for example. But I found a similar cryptid from right here in our little Missouri backyard. And one that is said to inhabit and travel up and down the Missouri River. So this thing can be spotted anywhere where the Missouri River flows. That seems to kind of be its lifeline, if you will. It's a cryptid monster about the size of a buffalo. Now, if you've never been up against a buffalo is much larger than a full-grown cow, for example. I mean, they're big. They're pushing up there with a horse. But this particular creature is said to be the size of a buffalo with red buffalo-like fur covering it all over. Now, on the top of its head, get ready for this, it's a single horn, like that of a unicorn. And below, a single eye, like that of a cyclops. Now, if this thing couldn't get any weirder and creepier, it has the human forearms with human hands, which it is said to be quite good at using, even to start fires and stuff with. But it has hooven back legs, and its bony spine protrudes out of its neck and back, almost like what I'm going to describe as a dinosaur. So this thing is, pardon my French, creepy as hell.
Yeah, it wouldn't be pleasant. If you saw it, it would scare the heck out of you.
You can imagine out there kind of floating around on a little boat, and this unicorn horn kind of pops up like a shark fin, and then the spines kind of come up, and yeah, it just kind of gets uglier from that. Now, this creature, and I'm going to butcher this, I'm sure, is called the mini washito. It's a Native American, as you could probably tell. The legendary creature, also known as the Missouri River Monster. It's described again as a tall, red-haired, bipedal beast with human hands, cloven hooves, and a single eye and a single horn on its forehead. Now, this was according to KX News, that ran a little story on a spotting that took place about 2022. And they did kind of touch upon, this goes way back, like 1890s kind of time frame. But again, not a lot of physical history, just little blurbs. But I did find in 1921, a historical researcher and writer by the name of Melvin Randolph Gilmore actually included a story of this in a book that he was writing. And I'm going to quote what he actually said about this creature. It is said that in the long ago, there was a mysterious being within the streams of the Missouri River. It was seldom seen by human beings. It was most dreadful to see, as it is said that sometimes it was seen with the water in the middle of the stream, causing a redness shining like the redness of fire as it passed up the stream against the current with terrific roaring sound. They say that if this dreadful being was seen by anyone in the daytime, anyone who thus saw it soon after became crazy and continued restless and writhing as if almost in pain until they were relieved by death. And it is said that one time, not a very great many years ago, this frightful being was seen by a man, and he told how it appeared. He said that it was strange form and covered all over with hair like that of a buffalo, but red, fiery in color, and that it had only one eye in the middle of its forehead, and above that, the single horn. Its backbone stood out, notched and jagged like an enormous saw, running the entire distance from its neck all the way down its back. As soon as the man beheld the awful sight, everything became dark to him, he said. He was just able to reach home, but he lost his reason to blindness that impeded him quickly, and soon after died in the following days. Now, that's some scary stuff. Again, not a lot of information on it, a lot of repeated stuff, but wow, that's a B-rated horror film if I could ever imagine one.
I mean, we've done some pretty strange ones, and again, we made an entire episode out of, what is a handful of sightings of a pterodactyl with a laser beam in its head or something? The Van Meter Visitor?
The Van Meter Visitor, yes.
Well, I think now that we've talked about a nice collection of creatures from Missouri, it's time for headlines.
Headline.
Mine is from Outkick.com, dated September 11th, 2025, by Sean Joseph. Bigfoot appears to be caught on trail cam while standing in a creek in Missouri. Trail cam, clear skies, tall figure. Missouri's Poplar Bluff serves fresh Bigfoot chatter. A trail cam in Poplar Bluff caught a large, dark figure standing in a creek, which the owner of said camera believes is a Bigfoot. The sighting took place in August and was reported within a few days. The picture is of a large figure standing in the creek, and it was taken in the middle of the day and definitely does not appear to be any kind of shadow. The owner of the trail cam seems pretty convinced that it's a Bigfoot, and he submitted their story along with the image to the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization. The man wrote to the BFRO, "I live in Poplar Bluff, Missouri, about 15 minutes west of town. The photo shows what looks to me like a Bigfoot. That's the only way I know to describe it. I was alerted via my iPhone that my camera had taken a picture because motion was detected. As soon as I pulled up the image to see what had triggered it, I was immediately curious because I could see something huge standing in the middle of the creek. He showed his wife the picture and she agreed it was something huge. But they couldn't quite make out what it was. So he checked the live feed, but by the time he did, whatever it was that had been standing in the creek was gone. He then went back to work and decided that he would investigate the area after. He and his brother went out to the spot and started looking for evidence of a Bigfoot. They came up empty, no footprints. Whatever it was evidently had stayed in the creek the entire time. Again, his words, I had my brother stand where the creature was standing and tried to replicate the image of him, at which point we realized the creature was several feet taller than my brother, who is 6 feet tall. My brother's head didn't even cover half the background that this thing had covered in the original picture. It was much taller, and at least 2 or 3 times wider than my brother. He also added, this creature is several feet taller than my 6-foot brother, as well as 2 or 3 times wider. It's colored brown and black, it's standing on 2 legs, has 2 arms, and appeared to be walking towards the camera. I believe it's a Bigfoot. Oh, and they've heard howls in this area on the farm for years, but, quote, have never really thought much of it until now.
That's a pretty good recognition. Well, for my headlines, I bounced around for a bit until finally deciding on one that I felt, unlike most of the other stories about our Missouri monsters, mine in particular, didn't have a lot of factual information or maybe a few little newspaper clips. So my headline is 100% factual, hard evidence and proof directly from the Missouri Conservation Department. Now, I don't care who you are, what your take is, if you believe in cryptids or not. These examples are by definition Missouri monsters that have been caught. We're going to talk about some of the large fish in our river and lakes. According to the Missouri Conservation, paddlefish. They hold the Missouri state record for the largest fish of any kind. The top prize weighing in at 164 pounds and 13 ounces. So just shy of 165 pounds. I can't imagine hooking a paddlefish and landing 165-pound fish.
You have to snag them because they don't
bite.
You don't hook them like, So yeah, they put up a heck of a fight when you hook them.
Man. And then even bigger, the alligator gar, the largest monster fish, conservation's words, not mine, species in Missouri, capable of reaching lengths of 10 feet or longer and weighing up to 350 pounds. 10 foot, that is pushing like a average size canoe or John boat, river boat. Can you imagine this alligator gar, big long? It almost looks like a snake at first glimpse with the body style. Just swim up next to your boat. Then we have lake sturgeon, another lake species of fish found here in Missouri, but
we had sturgeon in Missouri.
it is listed as a state endangered species.
Okay.
Again, one of those that we used to have quite a few, kind of faded out. They didn't think existed, found some, and I guess apparently are now bringing sturgeons back in and introducing them.
They say sturgeon are probably responsible for a lot of reported lake monster sightings up north because they get pretty big and they look pretty monstrous.
Yeah. And then we have the flathead catfish, a popular monster fish here in Missouri, with adults commonly reaching about 40 pounds or more. Now that's still a pretty good-sized catfish. But the big one, the giant of the catfish, is the blue catfish. A 130-pound blue catfish was actually caught in Missouri back in 2010, and even larger specimens are caught in other states' waters, meaning outside of Missouri. But the one here in Missouri was 130 pounds. These are the ones Bill and I have actually talked about a little bit that lie or allegedly lies below Bagnell Dam, where they just sat there with the cut up churned fish coming through the dams and open their mouth and just feeding frenzy. This is also one of the examples that's been spotted and actually filmed at Bennett Spring State Park, right down there at the main spring where the divers would go down. And they said they reached that zero gravity point where gravel and small rocks are just kind of hovering, if you will, with the pressure of the water beneath, but they can't go up any higher. And one of the guys I used to work with, he was a maintenance man. He actually was part of a diving crew. And he said he went down and he said, now, the stories that you hear that there's catfish big enough to swallow a human, he goes, that's a stretch. But he goes, ones that think they could swallow a human. Now, he goes, I totally believe that, and I've had some of those on film. So there you go. We've got some monster fish here in Missouri that are, by definition, monsters of Missouri. So a question for you, Bill. Which Missouri monster that we've talked about tonight, or maybe we didn't talk about tonight, but have before, is the one that you believe could be the most viable, the most real, the best proof, if you will, of a true cryptid? Not debunking, but something that we bring to the table.
In any kind of Sasquatch sighting, I think has a lot of weight to it. And I mean, I know there's a lot of pictures, a lot of foot casts and things like that. And there are definitely hoaxers out there. And I mean, science will tell you that, there would have to be a pretty big population to have a breeding population. And
to keep them alive.
How would you not find one of these things eventually with all the people that travel? I mean, I've known people that spend a good portion of their lives in the woods, people that would go out hunting every hunting season. And, those people will tell you there's nothing out there.
No.
But I think, really, those are the ones that I buy into the most. If there's going to be something, it's going to be the thing that everyone around the world has a story from their country, all 50 states, it's hard to discount something that people all around the world think they've seen.
Makes sense. And as you were saying that, I kind of had a crazy thought, to the point of, we all know people who probably spend just as much time in the woods as they do their house or among civilization. Maybe the reason why those people don't see those creatures is because those creatures kind of know that those people know what they're doing in the woods.
Yeah, maybe.
And when other people come partying, hooping, hollering, leaving beer cans and campfires that set stuff on fire, maybe that's the ones that are like, hey, you don't belong in my woods.
Hey, literally as recently as like 2 weeks ago, I went out to Bennett Springs with my son and we hiked one of the trails. I think it was a 4-mile round trip. But he had gotten ahead of me because I'm old and I don't walk as fast as he does.
I'm right there with you, buddy.
And we'd gotten to this part of the trail where it was kind of grown up on either side of it, and we went past these bushes, and I heard something. Swear I heard something like snuffle off in the bushes beside me. Now I've seen plenty of deer out there, and maybe that's what it was, or a wild pig, or who knows what. But I never saw whatever it was. And for a while, I could kind of hear something off into the trees and in the underbrush, not too far from where we were at. Then, of course, the story does take a weird, hilarious turn because as we had gotten to the point where we said, okay, we're going to turn around, we started coming back. I guess there was a guy who had been riding his bike out there. And we were talking, and you're out in the woods, and we thought it was just us, and we were cutting up.
Oops.
And then we hear this voice behind us, "Hey guys!" And I jumped. And this guy's like, "I didn't mean to scare you there,"
Screamed
but
like a little girl.
He's like, "I knew I would," and then he just biked on through. But yeah, when you run into somebody and you don't expect it, and especially when they're coming up behind you, which has happened more than once.
Maybe that's how the Bigfoot and Sasquatch feel. There's this
but
beer toting or keg toting party coming up behind you. What are you doing there?
But if you're walking through and it's been quiet and you haven't seen anybody for a while, when somebody does finally come through, you're not ready for it.
No.
But I could understand how easy it would be to walk past something and not see it when you're out there, especially
Agreed.
Summertime.
Agreed.
When everything's green, there's leaves on the trees.
Well, there's just so much out there.
Yeah,
I mean, there's
you look out in the woods,
underbrush and trees, and there's just so much.
Yeah, I mean, if it wasn't for the trails, it'd be hard to make your way around.
It's not like you're walking across a football field or something that's just
wide open.
Yeah.
And again, we've talked about it before. Everybody's got a camera in their pocket, but when you see something in the moment, I saw that shooting star, and it would have been a cool thing to get a picture of. But by the time I'd have got my phone out,
that shooting star probably lasted all of like 2 to 3 seconds, honestly. So yeah, if you don't have your phone already out, already zoomed in, you're not going to get it.
So are you on the same page there? Or?
Well, similar, and you're going to laugh at me because you've laughed at me before, Bill. But I've got hardened skin. I knew Bill would say either Bigfoot or megalodon sharks.
Well, I thought you meant just today.
Today. And we didn't really talk about megalodon in Missouri. So, see, I was right both ways, guys. But for me, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Well, Bill loves his Bigfoot. I fall back on my giants. It's a race that existed before Native American tribes. I think it is, to your point, so well documented, not only by the indigenous people, but they have found bones and graves and burial mounds all across the United States. But in particular, there's a large portion in Missouri, Illinois, Tennessee, right here kind of around us. And I just think there's too much possible proof, too many numerous accounts and stories that, and again, I'll say it, I think it's because in my mind, it would perhaps be the closest related to us, we little humans. And Bigfoot's not really a far stretch from that either. But I mean, if we can have us that exists, from little people that are 3 foot tall to, an average sized man pushing 6 foot, Andre the Giants and stuff kind of pushing 7 foot. Is it really that freaking hard to believe there might be an 8 or 10 or 12 foot,
This is completely off topic, but I saw a TikTok video this week of a guy. He does a really good Andre the Giant impression. And he likes to call people up and do that impression and then talk about conspiracy theories. We never landed on the moon. Stuff like that. Which it was hilarious because he sounds just like Andre when he does it, So you've been out and about and spent some time in Missouri, and I assume that you've spent some time out of doors in the evening. Not necessarily monster related, but do you have a good creepy story from being out at night somewhere?
I will share one that just took place about 2 years ago. And we, by definition, our house is now within the city limits. When we first bought it, like literally half our property was outside and half the property was inside. But just to set the pace, we're inside the city limits. We're sitting out on our front porch, kind of a semi-enclosed. And a lot of times we go out there and we just got the music turned down. We've got a TV out there too if we want to watch something. But sometimes we just like to go out and, have an iced tea or something and just listen to the sounds of nature. The crickets and, God forbid, the cicadas when they come by, the peep frogs. But one night we were sitting there and I'd heard a noise I couldn't explain. And again, we used to camp, we used to fish. I was out in the woods yesterday with my wife looking for ginseng and mushrooms and stuff. I won't embarrass myself with trying to replicate the sound, but it was a high-pitched squeal scream. wasn't a woman's voice, and it didn't really even sound human, but if I had to pinpoint it into one of those, it would be like a small child scream would be the closest. And there was something else answering it that was very similar. The scariest part was this literally was within 20 foot of our front yard and where we were sitting on the porch. And I think we were playing some music that night. So the first thing goes through my mind, oh, it's some, little backdraft thing on the songs. We turned it down and we heard it again. And we heard it again. And we heard it again. It just kept on and got more and more frequent. My wife, bless her soul, she's not afraid of much. Like we've had raccoons in the back when we had chicken feed and stuff. I call her out. I was like, hey, look, there's a family of raccoons. What's she do? She goes and wants to pet them. It's like, no, that's not a good idea. She goes, grab a flashlight. Let's walk over to this field. Let's see if we can figure out what this is. Well, I'm about half expecting, because we're in town, some teeny boppers out there playing a prank, or, got a little sound system on their phone. But we go over and I think I grabbed a stick and she grabbed a stick because it was grown up. It was kind of a weedy area. There's a new house built there now, but at this time it wasn't. And we're beating the weeds and everything. And I see the rear end of a skunk.
Yeah.
And it's got its tail lifted, pointed right at me, and I take off running. I think I dropped the stick. Apparently that is a similar noise that skunks do during mating season to call. Now
You interrupted an intimate moment.
I interrupted an intimate
Pepe
moment, yes, and they were about to get some jazz on, and we were the third wheel at the party, and we vacated immediately. Didn't smell anything, they didn't spray, but he had other things on his mind, I think, that night. So
I've got two. One's serious and the other's funny. The first one, we used to camp a lot when I was younger. I don't think I've been in quite a while now. But we had gone camping and we were on the riverside. And I have that first night syndrome really bad. If you don't know what that is, the first time you spend the night somewhere where you're not home, you don't really sleep. It's like a defense mechanism thing because you don't feel safe.
Okay. So
it's like
Makes sense.
if you go visit family and you've never slept in that house before, or you're in a hotel.
Yeah, spidey senses kind of going off.
So I don't sleep really well the first night I'm somewhere that is strange to me. And so I woke up in the middle of the night. There was probably 5 or 6 of us. I think we had 2 tents. And we weren't far from a pasture, like where there were cows. But I don't know that cows are nocturnal. And definitely heard something very large moving through the woods. Like you could hear like tree like snap, like branches snap, like big heavy snaps. Not just like something stepping on a twig, but like the crack of some big tree snapping. And heard that kind of off and on for a while. I didn't get much sleep after that. The other one, we had gone kind of running around one night, and my buddy's car had busted a radiator hose. And so we were trying to get home. So we would drive until, we like redlined, and then we'd pull over and wait for the car to cool down. And, we did a lot of role playing and whatnot. And I was always kind of the storyteller type. And so one of these stops, we had stopped at like the end of a long driveway. We just pulled off and we're like, okay, we'll let the car cool down. We're kind of talking and joking around. We had a tape recorder with us because we had been doing some amateur ghost hunting. And so somebody had decided they were going to record every one of these stops for some reason. But I was starting to tell this story. I was like, well, I'd seen this one time and I'd heard these stories, and I was telling about like these people who had stopped at this farmhouse for help in the middle of the night. And, then a guy came up and then, but when they knocked on the door, like the guy was like super paranoid, and he opened the door and he came charging at him with a shotgun, just like that guy right there. And you can just hear, like you hear me telling this reasonable story, and then I say that, and then you just hear like the sounds of gravel being kicked every which way as people freaking scattered. And I thought that was hilarious.
Well, I think that's all we've got to wrap up this edition. Another episode of Nightmares on the Lost Highway. We do hope that you've enjoyed more Missouri Monster Sightings. Let's be careful in those woods out there.
Hey, real quick, call to action. I think Eric would agree. We'd like to grow this Nightmares on the Lost Highway.
Absolutely.
If you could, if you're listening on Apple, if you would go and give us a review and rate us. If you have some feedback, that's fine too. Whatever platform you're listening, follow us, rate us, give us some reviews. That helps get some recognition and gets our name out there.
We do have a Facebook page, Nightmares on the Lost Highway. You can easily find us if you want to communicate with us, if you want to share some possibilities for future podcasts with us. Reach out. We want to talk with you guys.
I want to take a time to thank the people that helped bring this all together. Alex Tudor, you can almost call him our producer at this point. Sarah Tudor, who also helps with some of the technical stuff. I want to take a moment to extend thanks to Eric for letting us use his space to record in, kind of our makeshift studio.
I, in turn, would like to thank Bill for, one, putting up with me and using this camaraderie to do something we both very much love and enjoy doing, and thank Bill's family for allowing him to spend all the time to work and clean up our recordings and present them in what you hear in the final terms, the final edition, if you will.
And I'd like to thank all of you for continuing to listen. I know we've got some loyal followers out there. We do this as a labor of love, but we're happy that there are people that enjoy it hopefully as much as we do.
Thank you very much.